My name is Jed Wilson, and I'm going to be talking about a project that I worked on at Whalen Tire. So this is Whalen Tire's project development. Just as a quick history, I started working for Whalen Tire in 2003. They called me when they had an issue with one of their servers, and before that, at the time, they used to have an IT administrator that was full-time. So he's the one that kind of went through and set up all the Whalen Tire stores in Montana. But then he left to do other things, and they decided that they didn't need another IT administrator. They called on a problem basis. So whenever a problem would arise, they would give me a shout, and I would go out there and fix it. So downside to that is no maintenance going on whatsoever, just they'd call when there was an issue. They got to the point a couple of years down the road where they were in need of a new system and upgrades, so that is where the project proposal came from. This is kind of a picture of their old network setup. Each little branch would indicate a different store location, so this would be maybe Helena or Kalispell. This one would be a different store location. Each site would have their own separate internet connection, showed by the cloud here, and then the internet connection, or the ISP, would give the store location a modem of some kind, so that way they could connect to their internet. And then they would have a firewall. The firewall was a box called a Sonic Wall box, and what would happen is the Sonic Wall would create a VPN connection back to the corporate office location, which is indicated down here. So this is the corporate office. And what would happen is each Sonic Wall would cost about $800. They were kind of pricey equipment, and also the other downside to this was each ISP connection was a different internet service provider. So they would be paying Bresnan or Quest or whoever was available in that region to do their internet services. But just to gather from this old network setup, everything would connect back to the corporate office where the servers would reside. These indicate the servers down here. The people I worked with at Whalen Tire was Christy. She's an administrative assistant and a project manager. And I also worked directly with Tom Whalen, the company owner. And so Christy, I would work with her and tell her, okay, here's the technology that we want to use, here's how much it costs, and this is how it will work in the end. And Tom Whalen, he was more of just signing the checks. So as long as Christy approved it, then it was good to go pretty much. So in the development stage, we had to test some devices, and we had to test software, and we had to do some information gathering. So as far as testing devices, we want to implement a new system into Whalen Tire. What devices do we want to put in there, and how do they work? And also, will they fit the needs of the company? So we had to do some information gathering as to, what do they typically do on a normal day with their computer system. So the system requirements or functional requirements is they were in need of a simple interface. 90% of their work was done in a terminal program where it's just text-based, and they use the number pad and keys and everything to do their sales and invoices. They also needed email and web access, and since they didn't have a full-time IT administrator, they needed easy management, so something that we could put in that would kind of be foolproof and easy to upgrade and maintain. This is just a snapshot of what they do 90% of their work in, just a terminal program to make sales and keep track of invoices and all that. This is a screenshot here of after the system was in place, the way the management would work. So Christy, the system administrator, she could log in and she could see which stores were logged in and what they were doing on their screens. So she would have management. She could also go through and block, say if she didn't want them to go to time waster websites, they could block Facebook or YouTube or whatever they saw fit, or they could even log somebody out if they were doing something that they weren't supposed to do. So they can get in here, see what everybody's doing, and kind of manage from this endpoint. So for the new system, we moved from desktops to thin clients. A thin client is basically a device that a keyboard, mouse, and monitor plugs into, and it connects to a server. The server is located at the corporate office, and then they're also cheaper to purchase. They're not as expensive as desktops. Also with the new system, everybody logs into one server. So rather than going around and having to run updates on each individual client machine at different locations, you just had to update the server and you were done. And the project manager has control of the end sessions, where we saw that in this previous slide. We also set up some monitoring so that way they could log in to a certain website and they could see if the stores were up or down. And I can show that here in a few slides. This slide here shows the new network setup. And so we kind of simplified things. So now the internet connection is based out of the corporate office, and then they have one main firewall. And basically what happens is each store gets an internet connection from one ISP, the same ISP, VisionNet, and they get a modem at the store location. So this indicates one store like Kalispell. And then it would connect up to a router that's located in Billings, and then the routing would make it all look like every single one of these endpoints are on the same network. It's considered a corporate WAN. So at this point now we have less points of failure because we don't have the sonic wall boxes sitting at each location. And we have ease of manageability, just with everything looking like it's all on one local area network. So I guess I will show that the monitoring website here. So this is something that Christy would be able to go in and do and check to make sure that all their stores and locations are up and running. So here's a quick weather map that shows what each store is currently doing and their download and all that. This shows all the different store locations. This PWAN stands for kind of the private internet, the WAN, and then this is the Butte location down below. So she could get on here and she could see what each store's throughput was doing, or if they needed to, they could go through and see if something was down. So it looks like they have a printer that's misbehaving in Havre, so that's something that could be brought to her attention. Also a GPS map that shows all the store locations and whether they're up or down if it loads here. Oh no. Stand by. Ah, I think I killed the browser. Right, let's try that again. GPS map. So they could go in and they could see each of their locations, and green indicates that they're up, red would indicate that they're down and they need attention. So overall, our goals for the project were to create a simple interface, something that they wouldn't necessarily need an IT administrator for. 90% of their work done in the terminal program, so they're not really doing too much graphical projects, that sort of thing. So they had actually a really easy system requirements to meet, and with putting in our server at the Butte location and setting it up so that way everybody logs into one server, just kind of created that easy management and simple interfaces for everybody to log in and do their work. So, do you have any questions?
I have some questions.
Oh, okay. Melissa, what are your questions?
So, when you first went into Whalen Tire, kind of in the early days, what were some problems that you identified and that they identified for you that this system or redesign needed to address?
So they always called me on a problem basis, and it was always, this is not working, fix it right now, that sort of thing, and or we can't we can't sell tires until this is up and running. So some things that I noticed right away were just all the machines in general at the stores were in need of maintenance. They were dirty. They're in a dirty work environment, and they weren't really performing as they should. So they had software installed on them that shouldn't have been installed, and just things were running a little bit slower. And so before I presented them with the thin client approach and the server approach, we actually did go out and address some of those issues where we cleaned up the machines, cleaned up the environment. A large part of why the sonic wall boxes that were failing in the old network setup were because of just misuse. The fans were getting clogged with dust. They weren't able to dissipate the heat properly, so they would start to fail. That sort of thing. So, and as with the machines as well. So the machines would collect the dust, and then components would start to fail. The one nice thing about the thin clients is there's really no moving parts. It's all one little box. There's no fan in it. You can put books on top of it if you needed to. It's a device that's meant to run in harsher environments than with the components or computers that have moving parts. So, as far as them addressing issues, it was pretty much the things that I saw from my standpoint as what needed to be addressed first, unless of course they called me and they said, hey, this isn't working, and that was an obvious issue. So
sure. Well, the flip side of problems are opportunities, right? So when you wrote the system proposal or started doing a lot of upgrading later on, did you present them with some opportunities that perhaps they didn't realize at the time?
Yeah, they kind of, in the IT world, you kind of know the capabilities of what the equipment can do, but for the end user, they just get used to doing the same thing over and over again, so they don't know the bigger picture. So when we went through and we presented them with the idea of cleaning up their network and just having one internet service provider for all their store locations, that was something that they were really excited about, especially getting away from that sonic wall model, because they kept on losing their sonic walls at each location, and that was $800 to $1,000 just to replace that at each time that happened. And then now that we have this whole basically the network just, even though they're all in these remote locations scattered across Montana, it looks like one gigantic network. So, one PC over in Kalispell can talk to the other one that's all the way over in Billings, and it's just transparent to the end user. So at that point, then we can start to do some pretty fancy monitoring and give them better access to the server and the resources that they need that's housed at the corporate office. So, yeah.
And then one more question, and this has to do with information gathering, and I think you had a slide on it early on, probably before system requirements.
Yeah.
What kinds of things did you do to gather information, and in doing so, like, who did you talk to? What did you do?
Sure.
To define requirements.
So we kind of looked at what the average employee does during their normal workday, and so the one thing that we found is 90% of the time they're sitting in this terminal program, selling tires, doing invoices, that sort of thing. And so these thin clients, basically, the end user comes in, say like he's starting up for the day, turns on the thin client device. He gets two icons on his desktop. One would just take him into the terminal program, and so 90% of his work can be done right there. All text-based, and the server for the terminal program just resides in the corporate office. Now, if there was something else that they needed to do, say internet or email, they would launch the other icon on the desktop that would send them into a standard Windows environment where they could launch a web browser like Internet Explorer or open Microsoft Outlook. So by doing that, kind of the resources were divvied up, you could say. So when they're in the terminal program, they're directly connected to the terminal machine. They're not running Windows. They're not using any resources on the server. And then when they do need to check email or browse the web, they can launch into a standard desktop environment.
Okay. So you go in and watch them work. So say a front desk clerk type person.
Watch the person work and see what they were doing. And it was really just everything was in the terminal program itself. So.
Okay. Yeah. So in terms of gathering information, it seems like you have users who are sitting at the desk selling tires, right? And then you have Christy, who kind of gave you directives and coordinated things, and then Tom Whalen, right? So did you ever talk to him?
So we did have to, propose the whole system to him and say, here's what, here's your pluses and minuses, basically. Mm-hmm. So we had to go through and.
So what were his concerns with the system compared to, say, someone front desk?
So his standpoint is it just needs to work. He doesn't want to have to deal with it. Doesn't want to have to. He says he just wants to come in and double click something, and it just needs to be on. Mm-hmm. And at that point, they did have some frustrations with their sites going down, and everything was kind of the equipment they had was kind of getting older. And things were starting to fail more frequently, and so we had to buy more parts, and just to get the store back up and running in a reasonable amount of time. So he was at the standpoint where he says, I don't really care, you know what you're doing, just give me something that I can double click and I can be up and running. So that was his philosophy.
Okay. So. And then what about Christy?
So Christy kind of fell into the position of doing IT support. She wasn't really on that side of it, but everybody calls her if there is a computer issue. And now that the interface is a lot more simplified, she can solve, say 95% of the issues, but there is a certain time where she has to call and say, here's what's going on, how do I fix it, that sort of thing. So for Christy, she kind of had a little bit more of a grasp of the picture of the equipment and the server requirements and how things were going to look to the end user.
And she's an office manager, right? So she also supervises.
Yeah, she's also supervising. She does a lot of, each location has a kind of a store administrative assistant And so she works directly with them, and so she knows the needs of each location, and was able to relay that information to us. So
the system, it seems like the inputs are going to be like tires sold on that terminal screen, right? What kinds of outputs does the system produce?
So as far as outputs, it prints invoices, that sort of thing for the customer. So the customer goes to buy the tires, and it prints the invoices for them, or the receipts. And I guess that would be the only
Does it aggregate information
outputs.
and so that they can do financial reporting?
Yeah,
Or do they do something else with that?
it does that all in the terminal program. So Christy would log in and run reports, I think, on a weekly basis, and it would print out the reports of sales and all that stuff, or inventory,
So
that
from
sort of
that, they
thing.
can get inventory and.
Yeah. Yep.
Okay.
Any other questions?
All I- You have questions?
Did it turn out the way you wanted? Like, do you see him calling you less and everything seems to be working more steady?
I do see them calling me less. The one issue with the thin clients is, even though they do 90% of their work in that terminal program, the things that they do on the Windows desktop were a little bit more graphic intensive than what we had realized. So they were going to websites that have like Flash animation, and a lot of that stuff isn't really, it's not as smooth. If you compare a computer to a thin client, it's just it looks a little choppy to the end user. So they get this new system and everything, and we had designed it for a certain, to meet certain requirements, and then they're saying, oh, it's slower than what we had before. Whereas it's not really slower, they're just seeing the graphics kind of stutter a little bit. Now they have a technology that would correct that, so that would be maybe a future upgrade down the road. But as far as, I do get less calls, and if a system or if a thin client for whatever reason does fail, they have an extra one. They just send it out to the store, they plug it in, they press the on button, they're right back up and running, and then they can send the unit back, and we can take a look at it and see what happened to it. So
What might be useful really quick is, I'm not sure if the audience to this video is going to know the difference between a thin client versus a computer, what that is. Would you give us a quick explanation of that?
Sure. So a desktop is just a, let's see, how can I? So everybody's familiar with just a tower and a monitor and everything. This PC would have a CD-ROM drive and a hard drive in it and a processor and memory. And then you could hook up a monitor to it and install programs. You'd have to have an operating system on the computer, and all programs would be installed on here. Whereas a thin client, let's see if I can. Thin client kind of relies on something to connect to. So this is a little dummy terminal that has a very simplified operating system. It accepts a keyboard and a mouse, and it shows the output on the monitor, and it connects to something that has a lot of horsepower, typically a server that has an operating system installed on it and programs that you'd want to access. So this does a lot less processing than the desktop PC. And you can kind of see here, like this one's $299, this one is $81. So you do have a savings for equipment right off the bat.
So basically, a desktop system has its processor, its own processor, but a thin client, several clients connect to a single processor.
That's correct, yeah.
Right?
Yeah, in that scenario, several of these clients connect to basically a big desktop that has lots of power on it, lots of processing power, lots of memory, lots of hard drive space. And so in that scenario also, if you say like there was an update, like going from Office 2010 to Office 2013, in the desktop scenario, you'd have to install Office 2013 on each computer. Whereas with the thin client scenario, you would install it on the server, and then it would be available for everybody's thin clients that logs in. So,
Okay.
yeah. Any other questions?
Do you see them resistant to change now that things kind of work now? They don't want to spend any more money. You know, like you said with the video, you could do a change and the video would work good, but or maybe backup servers or something. You see them now saying everything works. We don't want to spend any more money. No.
Yeah, so there were some other proposals that we did throw out there, and one of them was a network upgrade. And you know, we can give them our reasoning for as to why we think it's why they should upgrade, but it's really you know, their call, and they're kind of at the point now where, well, everything's working the way we want it to. We don't really see any reason to invest in it anymore. So we gave them a proposal for upgrading their network and getting a fiber connection in their corporate office, and it was something that they didn't really see the needs for. The other issue with our scenario down here is there's one single point of failure. So let's say this is the terminal server, the one that they do like 90% of the work on, and this icon here indicates the server that everybody logs into from the thin clients. If this server were ever to go down, all their stores would be down as well. So one thing that we wanted to do was get them a secondary server in place, so if anything happened to the first one, they would be able to recover quickly, and the stores wouldn't be down for a long period of time. So that was what this is moderately priced for a server. We were at $3,689, and this was just to have a second level of redundancy, so if anything ever did go wrong, we could get back up and running. And I'm still actually trying to push that to get them to purchase a backup server of some kind. So I don't like single points of failure.
Do you think the users like it better? You know, now they can't use Facebook and they're being monitored, so would you say users like it better, or they don't like the new system, or do you think it matters from what you observed?
I think people just kind of get used to what they have, so they may not like the fact that they actually haven't blocked any websites per se. They just have the ability to. So it's one of those judgment calls for administration where if they see something being abused, they can make the call as to whether or not to block it. So from the feedback that I've heard is it's better than what they had before, and everything's more up to date, and they can get their work done quicker. So yeah, great questions.
Well, thank you so much.
Thank you.
I'm sure we'll be seeing you again.
Stop recording.
If we
Cool.
figure out what I'll do.